Okay, here we go with chapter 3, and this is kind of the foundation of the class, a short explanation on psychosocial development and that approach to development. So here are the learning objectives for this chapter. So here's some things that I would like you to be able to do by the end of this chapter. So you can stop and look at these, which would be helpful. And Eric Erickson is going to play a key role in this whole class because we're going to use his 8 stages of development as kind of a core. So personalities development through a psychosocial process. It's a lifelong experience influenced by the 3 interrelated forces. Okay, biological, person's unique circumstances and developmental history, early family experiences, degree of success in resolving crises, and of course the social, cultural, and historical forces. Um, so we're going to talk about these over and over and over again because this class is going to focus on the individual and their growth in relationship to their environment and in particular interpersonal types of relationships. So Erickson says some good stuff. You see a child at play and is so close to seeing an artist paint. For in play, a child says things without uttering a word. You can see how he resolves his problems. You can see what's wrong. Young children especially have enormous creativity, and whatever is in them rises to the surface in free play. And we will talk about, as the semester goes on, the importance of play and how free play is disappearing and more adult-directed play is taking preference, and what is that doing in a developmental sense? The more you know yourself, the more patience you have for what you see in others. So part of this class is hopefully you're going to take the information and apply it to yourself and have a greater understanding of how you have become you and how you might evolve in the future. Um, Stages of development, Erickson has a discontinuous approach to development, which is stages approach rather than a continuous, which is not stages. It's kind of an ongoing type of situation. A period of life is characterized by specific underlying organization. These stages follow the epigenetic principle, in other words, a biological plan for growth that allows each function to emerge systematically until the individual is fully developed. We'll also talk about epigenetics, how the role it plays in genetic expression later. And themes of earlier stages may reemerge at any point. In other words, so when we talk about trust and mistrust, does that show up later? When we talk about autonomy versus shame, does that start to show up later? Does guilt? A lot of times these earlier developments crises show up in adolescence and adulthood. So here are his 8 stages, and by the end of the semester, hopefully you know these very well. And this is out of your book. The psychosocial crisis plays a critical role, and it's not a crisis in the way that we normally think of a crisis as something that's kind of amazing, astounding, and befuddling. It's basically a state of tension that results from discrepancies between the person's competencies at the beginning and the stage and society's expectations at the end. So in other words, what's expected of a person as they grow and develop, as they go through these various times of their life. We should start to develop certain social competencies, and if we don't, then they can become problematic. And so we're trying to, starting in early childhood, develop certain social capabilities that will lead to success as one journeys through their life. So here's the expansion of the lifespan stages. So it's taken from Erickson's 8 to these 11 stages, which are the stages that we will cover in this semester. The prime adaptive ego quality are resources for coping. In other words, it's basically a character strength that one develops when they successfully manipulate a particular crisis. So it's good to have hope. It's good to know that things will work out in the end, to have a sense of willpower and self-direction and so forth. So you can look at these, and these are coping mechanisms that are very lead to a successful type of life experience. So here they are, and these you can read through these. These are definitely in your book, so you can look at these different ego qualities and kind of check them out, see how you're doing. Um, Developmental tasks happen during critical or sensitive periods, which are periods of development when I'm most ready to acquire a new ability. So, in other words, language. When am I most open to learning language? And when am I most open to teachable moments? In other words, um, I'm sensitive to another person when they talk to me. I'm listening carefully to their words and how they say them, the emotions that go with that word. Because language acquisition happens during a critical period, and if it doesn't happen properly, then there can be lifelong consequences. So developmental tasks can reflect gains in physical, cognitive, social, and emotional development. You'll see that they can be as many as 5 or as few as 3 that will go through um, each chapter and each developmental stage. And here they are. Here they're listed, and by the end of the semester, again, we will have gone through each one of these um, in detail. So let's move on, and here they are for the rest of the life. And these are from your book, so you can certainly look at them in your book. So an example would be communication would be one of these developmental tasks in infancy. Friendship in middle childhood becomes very important, because how do I define myself? What is my self-concept? To autonomy from my parents in adolescence. I need to separate from my parents. I'm journeying into adulthood. And then the central process for resolving the psychosocial crisis. Okay, in other words, what reflects, what do I do, how do I get through this stage? Okay, how do I manipulate this particular crisis? And so again, we're talking about the psychosocial crisis. What do I have at the beginning? What do I need to gain through the crisis? And what's the process that will take me there? So example would be imitation in toddlerhood. I imitate others. I look at others around me, okay, to learn about trust and mistrust. I learn in autonomy and shame, it's imitation. I learn to imitate those around me, and primarily adult figures. Industry versus inferiority. Education is the process that can encourage a child to either succeed with all those kids with their hands up, or discourage a child where they feel a sense of inferiority. This could also go back to initiative guilt, and they feel guilt or shame. And so core pathologies are a negative or destructive force, something I didn't get through the crisis very well. And so I have this negative outcome that is not going to benefit me as I go through later stages of my life. So here we see how it can go one of two ways. The crisis resolution either goes to new capabilities and future development, or into restriction of development through core pathologies and destructive forces rather than growth forces. So this is, again, you can see this in your book, but I think you should understand that this can go either way, and of course they both have consequences. The radius of significant relationships are very important. Our social network, I've talked about it before, becomes very important in our resilience and our ability to survive successfully, to flourish as we go through life. And it kind of grows as we are younger, and then it restricts. We must restrict it as we get older, because we don't have the energy both psychologically, emotionally, and physically, to maintain the levels of relationships that maybe we once were able to have in earlier years. So we see this, that it kind of works its way out, and here's the different levels of these interpersonal relationships again. So this semester we will focus on a couple of things that are very important. In context of development, what is the context in which development is taking place, and what are the interpersonal relationships that are found within that particular context. Okay, so that ends chapter 3.